Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our program Caring for Converts. This is a program which has been born out of a report that has been initiated by ourselves here at the New Muslims Project in Markfield in Leicester, an organisation which provides guidance, support, education, advice, counselling, training for converts to Islam across the whole of the UK, and Cambridge University. I'm here today with my colleague, Ruqaya, and we work at the office of the New Muslim Project, and we're looking at aspects of this report, and we're trying to look into them a little more deeply and discuss them on your behalf as a means of helping you to understand what it really means to be a convert to Islam and what it means to have to address some of the challenges that we're faced with as a convert community here in the UK and no doubt in other parts of the world, particularly in Europe and perhaps even in America. And so, Ruqaya, we're going to look today at guidance and spirituality. And this was a really significant part of the discussion for the women who took part in this report. Some of them argued that converts are vulnerable and need to be aware of whom they're associating with, while one participant expressed concern over converts whose understanding of Islam was limited and who appear to have complex problems to deal with, which may include mental health issues or adoption by radical groups. Here, such converts were insufficiently aware of the problematic nature of the particular interpretation of Islam offered to them, making them potentially susceptible to manipulation and radicalism. And I think that working at the New Muslims Project, we really, we do sort of experience some of that, and we do see that quite clearly exercised in a very kind of subtle kind of way in relation to converts, and particularly in the early instances and the early transitional stages of Islam.
I think, yeah, it's the converts particularly vulnerable when they first take their shahada, because they don't necessarily, unless they're particularly well read and have done a lot of research, know a great deal about what different strands of Islam and the people behind it may represent. They don't necessarily understand if behind a particular group there is a certain political agenda that they may not want to become involved with, but may unwittingly become involved with because they don't have sufficient knowledge to understand, to
be able to identify
and who they're dealing with.
Yes. And it's quite hard, actually, for the converts to be able to navigate the way through, so many different organizations, individuals, websites, literature, and so much.
Yeah, I think increasingly so, because with the sort of explosion on the internet of material, there's just so much that you can come into contact with.
Absolutely.
And how do you kind of
no guidance.
Disseminate, what is good
authentic,
and what's not so good, and how to kind of determine, whether this is kind of something you should be investigating further or not.
And we often find that the first people that converts come in contact with is a particular advocate who sort of helps them and supports them through the process of change and transition, and who will bring them into Islam. And fortunately for most converts to Islam, that advocate, and it's usually just one person or a family or a person and a close friend. And we're usually very fortunate that most converts who meet a good advocate will provide really good instructions for them, will guide them in a really sensitive way to the whole process of becoming a Muslim, will want to know, what is their family background, will sort of see beyond just the person themselves, and want to be very sensitive towards addressing all aspects of their particular identity and background and so on.
Yeah, I think, the danger obviously lies in those groups that are are often the ones with the resources and the connections to offer kind of a first home really to converts where they can feel welcomed and accepted, and before long so obviously people become aware of what the agenda is behind any particular group, and then decide for themselves whether that's where they're comfortable with or not. But for those who are not so discerning, it can be much more difficult to kind of disentangle what is really an authentic expression of Islam and what is kind of a politically manipulated interpretation of the faith.
And it's difficult for us, working in the project, the New Muslims Project and the Caring for Islam concern, that you feel that you want to put your arms around everyone and you want to protect everyone and create that sort of barrier against what is out there and what may be contentious and difficult for them, and you want to protect them and you want to offer them the best and introduce them to the best and so on. But it's not within our ability and within our resources to be able to do that, because we're just an organisation here in the UK, and to be able to reach out to those far-reaching parts of the UK is difficult.
But that sort of assumes that you can have a level of control that you may not be able to have anyway, despite the amount of resources that you have or haven't got. Sometimes people just need to experience for themselves different forms of the faith, and they can kind of, by trial and error, work out where it is they want to be, and hopefully they're not too kind of damaged or badly influenced along the way.
In some ways that's a more healthy kind of way, really, because you help them to discern for themselves. And I think I often point out to people who contact us that they should try and go and experience as much as they can, but be wary and just take a step back. Just think about what it is that they have heard at that particular event or that particular occasion, and then be able to kind of filter what they feel they're able to take on and what they feel is authentically Islam. Because sometimes I think it's not that difficult actually to realise what is authentically Islam, because Islam is the natural way.
It's what sits comfortably with your own heart. And what causes you kind of stress or disconsternation is obviously something that's not right for you. Absolutely.
Invariably around the table, we had lots of people who talked about there's something in British culture when we talk about you're the greatest teacher ever. When you went to school, who was the greatest teacher? And we all remember in our childhood, as we went into the various stages of our education, who was our greatest teacher and who we felt, impacted on our lives more than other teachers, who was much more understanding, more caring, more compassionate, but was also really concerned about you as a child in terms of your future and how you went forward. And again, with a lot of converts, they remember very fondly the people who were there for them, who took them under their wing, and who guided them into Islam and guided them through all of that, that dross that they had to go through.
Confusion.
Yes, that confusion that they had to go through, and helped them to navigate a very balanced and positive route forward for themselves. And they always speak very kindly about those people, and thankfully we have so many of those people who help converts on a regular basis. And I mean, even though there are many mosques where women are unable to enter and pray and do the things they want to do, there are mosques around the country and Islamic organizations who are trying very hard to present Islam to converts and support them and help them through that particularly difficult time. But there was some criticism of the heritage Muslim communities, and other more established converts were slightly frustrated by the lack of religious infrastructure that converts enjoy, And of course, there were few courses of instruction in the rudiments of Islamic faith, and many mosques and Islamic organizations remain inaccessible to women, which make it difficult for female converts to meet and engage with other Muslim women, as well as to participate in community life. Now, there's been several attempts here in the UK by various different organizations to address this ongoing problem. And regardless of how much money is thrown at it and how much effort is put into it, we seem to make little headway. It's almost like, we're stuck in treacle. We can't move. We can't get away from the starting blocks, as it were.
Yeah.
And so between that and the glass ceiling that British women talk about, generally, in terms of, equal pay and equal recognition for equal work done, as Muslim women, we're kind of stuck with our feet, and we're bleeding from our heads, and we're not able to move at all. And it just seems, as if we're fighting sort of so many corners, but we're not able to make any headway, really. What seems to be the problem?
I think particularly the mosques in this country are predominantly controlled by members of the South Asian communities, and women there don't appear to have, when they come to this country, a history of active engagement with the mosques generally. I mean, there are exceptions, but I think until women themselves start to demand this, it's not going to change, is it? Because if it's left to the man, they haven't got any incentive to change it. Why should they interrupt their nice boys' clubs?
Yes. That would be difficult.
But I mean, it's women too have got to make demands for change, and unless they do that, if they're content, not to be part of an active Muslim community, it's very difficult for change to begin.
Indeed, and I suppose the convert community. I hope that we will develop ourselves to a place where, inshallah, God willing, we will play an active role in that. At least that would be helpful for all Muslim women in the country. I hope you'll join us after the break, when we'll continue to discuss this particular area of guidance and spirituality for converts to Islam. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to Caring for Converts, the programme initiated by a report that has come out recently here in the UK as a collaborative effort between the New Muslims Project, based here at Markfield in Leicester, and for which myself and Ruqaya both work, and the University of Cambridge. This was a report on the female narratives of conversion to Islam, female perspectives. And we're looking at guidance and spirituality, and talking about, maybe the aspects within our Muslim communities that curtail women's ability to be able to access the necessary guidance and spirituality that we need as converts to Islam when we enter the faith. We were just talking about the fact that many of the mosques here in the UK remain inaccessible to women, and it's difficult for female converts to meet and engage with other Muslim women, as well as to participate in community life. And we don't see that there's going to be a change in that, at least very soon, Ruqaya.
No, not unless women start to demand it.
Yes, yes, indeed. And, it would be so nice if the convert community, rather than, of course, we like the idea to be incorporated into the Muslim community in every aspect that can be. But it would be nice if we could flex our convert muscles out there and decide, and just sort of call a halt to this sort of ridiculous and nonsensical, barriers.
Gender apartheid.
Yes, gender apartheid. That's absolutely. Yeah. That women are experiencing here in the UK. In terms of educating converts about Islam, women who had married heritage Muslim men recognised that frequently husbands played a key role in guiding their converts' wives. But then that wasn't necessarily always the case. Remember, we talked to Zarina, one of the older Muslim women there recently, and she said that even though her husband was fantastic at going out and doing dawah and talking to other people about Islam and going and doing presentations and so on and so forth. She learned very little from him. Well,
I think she said that she'd learned a very culturally infused interpretation of Islam.
Yes.
That it wasn't until she was older and was able to attend different forms of education that she realised that's what it was.
Yes.
And that she discovered a new side to Islam that she hadn't previously learned.
Indeed, indeed. So it's difficult. And then, it's not unusual then for converts to Islam to sort of, see Sufism as an attractive route. As you said earlier, not merely because there's so many converts in that particular expression of Islam already, but also because they see a very maybe compassionate side to the leaders of that community and the sheikhs who lead those communities, and they feel attracted by that sort of genuine sincerity.
Yeah,
and
also it's very open and inclusive, and there's perhaps not those barriers to participation that they may find within.
Yeah.
And there's also probably a stronger sense of community in terms of finding a group of people with whom they can identify.
Yes, and I suppose it's about strengthening that spiritual tie that really for a lot of converts to Islam that's difficult, because if you haven't been brought up in a family where you are already quite God conscious and your family are practicing, whether that be Christianity or Judaism or whatever, perhaps mostly the three monotheistic faiths, then it's highly unlikely that it will be easy for you to create that relationship with God when you haven't had that learned experience of what that might be. And I think, for me personally, I remember, my upbringing in the Catholic Church and going to Mass and going to all sorts of religious rituals where we were constantly as children being brought by our parents. And also then how that initiated my own interest in the church and my connections with the church in terms of being part of the choir, attending, Mass, and so on, and being there on a regular basis, not by the fact that my parents were taking me there, but by choice then, having had that learned experience. Yeah. And for a lot of converts, it is difficult, and it's about how do we assist them in trying to establish this relationship with God, which is something they're not accustomed to. And then when they have done that, how do we nurture that, and how do we try to help them to create this the methods, the methodologies behind sustaining that relationship with God. One of the participants actually considered that access to higher spiritual states could be achieved through active citizenship, and that time and energy devoted to spiritual endeavours should be balanced with engagement in practical good work. This implied that an excessive immersion in spiritual practices could appear self-indulgent and lead a convert to neglect collecting the great rewards gained from the service to humanity. And I think I have a great sort of affinity with that whole idea, the sense that, you become closer to God through becoming more active in the good deeds or in the good work that you carry out in the society.
I think historically that's what spiritual groups have always done. They've had that balance between remembering God and between engaging in society, so that they have sort of one foot in both realms, really. Yes,
yeah. In another opinion, it was decided, I think, unanimously that a relationship with the Quran provided a very spiritual and moving experience. And I think all of the vast majority of the participants were very clear about that. They were very clear that, they approached the Quran independently, and they were able to draw from it a lot of strength for their own, for helping them tackle their own particular challenges. One participant described that when she was reading the Quran, she felt like that God was addressing her personally. And I think a lot of them would have agreed with that. She had been introduced to mosques which offered a very dry and legalistic prescriptive perspectives on Islam, and had subsequently moved beyond this to incorporate spiritual practices into her life that added critical substance to her faith. And I think that's really where you want most converts to get to. You want them to get from the transition, where they're entering into Islam, where they're dealing with the basics, where they're establishing their Islamic principles and so on, and then where they're wading through all the stuff and the material that they will encounter through the internet, through meetings and events and so on, and even the mosques, to the point where individually they become very strong in themselves.
Yeah, Islam becomes embedded in the heart.
Yes. Yeah, and it's really where you want to get people, isn't it? There was also a kind of a concern about how scholarship can be used to control converts, in the sense that it was acknowledged that the development of the convert occurs over time, and as knowledge of the faith increases, so does the ability to make an intellectual assessment and evaluate information that's being presented, including distinguishing between cultural interpretations of Islam and Islam itself. And I think, sometimes that is a kind of that can be work on both ways for the convert women. For instance, this idea of intellectual or knowledge of the faith, can also keep converts generally, not just women, but men as well, can keep them at the periphery of the Muslim community, almost suggesting that, not that they're not worthy, but that they somehow don't, they haven't come up to the expectations. They are still only converts, in spite of the fact that they may be converts to Islam for a very long period of time.
If people do make that assumption, then that reflects badly on themselves for making that assumption, because if you look back to the first Muslims, including the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there was never a distinction made between categories of Muslims. Everybody was just a Muslim.
Yes.
There's no distinction made between, whether your parents were Muslim or whether you were, whether you'd taken an active choice to embrace the faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the earliest times, we don't see these distinctions. These distinctions are something new.
Yes.
All a person does need to become Muslim is to have a very strong belief in Tawheed, in the oneness of Allah.
Yes.
And if people try to categorise Muslims into inferior categories of Muslims, that is really a poor reflection on their own understanding of what a Muslim is.
Yes, yeah, and it tends to keep converts at the periphery of the Muslim community, not allowing them to involve themselves to the extent that they should be involved in the Muslim community. I mean, if we look back here in the UK at the convert communities in the past, and particularly Abdullah Quilliam, the community of the convert Abdullah Quilliam in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we find a man who was absolutely at the top of his game there,
yes,
leading a Muslim community, establishing all sorts of a huge infrastructure in Liverpool, where he had an orphanage, he had schools, debating societies, magazines, both weekly, monthly and bi-monthly, all sorts of things going on, and where he was quite dynamic in his role as leader of the community. Yeah, to the point where he was given the title by the Ottoman state at the time as Sheikh ul-Islam al-Britannia, the leader of Islam in Britain. Now, it's very sad that converts to Islam here in the UK now are not really given those kind of positions and are not regarded as being able to take those positions and to lead in the community, inshallah.
Yeah, but he was in some senses a very unique personality.
Yes.
And after his demise, his followers couldn't emulate his leadership, and slowly his legacy sort of started to crumble in a sense.
Yeah.
In terms of
True.
not being self-sustaining or not having somebody else who could assume that same role.
Indeed, indeed, and that was exacerbated by the fact that there was a very poor Islamic infrastructure as well that he was able to leave behind. Thank you for listening. It's been nice to have you. We thank you for joining us in this program, and we wish you salam alaikum and hope you'll join us in the next program. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.